Alright, AP World. You know, it's been a while since we've done some video notes. I know, not your favorite thing, but a time comes, and this is one of them. Um, so I'm going to just run you through about 30 minutes here. We'll see how far it goes, and then that's where we'll pick it up when we are back together in December. Hey, that rhymes. Awesome. All right, so we're getting going here with C right here down below the picture of Akbar, and talk a little bit here about how religion is going to play a role in this term legitimizing power. All right, that's one of those. That's a term that only the College Board could dream up, but one we have to be aware of. And so when you hear that concept of legitimizing power, a lot of it, think about it this way: it's kind of like how political leaders, whether it be a king or an emperor, whatever it may be, a president, how they display their power. Okay, whether it's in the form of having statues of themselves being made, or maybe it's building a really grand palace or something like that. It's their way of kind of like being able to stand back and say, look how powerful I am, look at these, what I'm able to do. I'm able to, yeah, like commission an 80-foot statue of myself, or again have that kind of stuff. Okay, it's where you display that power, and kind of gives almost like a physical something you can go and visit, you can see, rather than just someone saying, I have a lot of power, trust me, that kind of a thing. So we'll get a little bit into that, a little bit into how religion, how art all kind of gets mixed into all that. Okay, and so boom, there we go. That'll give you a little bit of what I'm talking about here. And the picture you see over there on the right side is from Versailles in France, outside of Paris. Again, built by the Bourbon family when we had all the Louis in charge there, and we talked about absolutism here a little earlier in the unit. That would be a very good example of legitimizing power through the building of a massive palace and all these very elaborate grounds and that sort of thing. Okay, so yeah, whether it's building things, whether it's kind of using religion, sometimes manipulating religion, we'll take a look at that as we kind of go through here. Alrighty, all right. Let's see. Over in Russia, you'll see this happens during the rule of Peter the Great. And Moscow had been, up to that point, with the Ivans and the beginnings of the Romanovs, had been viewed as the capital of Russia. Peter, with his kind of obsession with wanting to modernize and emulate the West, saw Moscow as being just really old-fashioned and kind of this harkening back to the old Russia. He wants a new Russia, a modern Russia, and so he relocates the capital, as you have there. I don't need to read it to you, but establishes a new capital, which he just happens to name after himself. And commissions the building of these elaborate palaces and all that sort of thing. The picture you see over there on the right side is the Winter Palace, and I think the picture on the flip side is from inside the Winter Palace. That would be another good example for you to kind of tuck into the somewhere in there to go along with Versailles. Would be the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg as another way of legitimizing that power. Okay, through the use of architecture. All right. Let's see. We'll jump over here to Africa. Kind of leaving them alone here lately, and we can't leave any little corner of the world alone for too long. Askia the Great, you see pictured over there. He is one that he's pretty much just kind of picking up from Mansa Musa. Pretty much everyone who's come in before him, and the use of Islam especially. Okay, we talked about with Mansa Musa and just how he dedicated himself to the faith. So Askia is kind of picking up on really a pattern that had already been established there in what had been Mali and eventually overtaken, becoming the Songhai Empire. And really uses faith as his way of kind of to legitimize his power. He uses it as kind of this this unifier that brings people together, but also at the same time, when you see that word consolidates power, when you consolidate power, it's like you're gathering all the power into one place, as in, into the hands of one man in this case. And so that's kind of how you see the use of religion sometimes playing the same role. And we'll make the Songhai Empire a fairly powerful one during its reign, its time. Okay. A really good example comes from the Mughal Empire, and that would be the building of the Taj Mahal. This is built by going back to Shah Jahan, and builds it actually as kind of like a tribute to his deceased wife. Kind of in his grief, he wants something grand to memorialize her in a way, but also at the same time, it's this again incredible architectural work that like it says there, just displays kind of puts this place where people come to see it, and they're just they're in awe, the jaws dropping, all that, the just the beauty of it, the size of it, all that sort of thing. And so once again, another example, even though the building of the Taj Mahal maybe come from a different kind of motivation, in the end, it's still another example of that legitimizing of power, right? And so, boom, that's what we're talking about with these kinds of examples. Matter of fact, I think I can keep it going. How far can he go with this? The Ottoman Empire, yeah. The picture over on the right side there, I think that's on the right side there, and that is the Blue Mosque, the Hagia Sophia. Is the name of the mosque that is built, of just incredibly elaborate mosque that is built by the Ottomans, and also a place, by the way, which is alleged to have the most perfect acoustics in the world inside the mosque. When it comes to recording music, there have been, it's not like you have rock bands going in there and recording, but choral works, vocals and things like that. From more like traditional music, but what they call just absolutely perfect acoustics. That's not why they built it. They built it as another example of this legitimizing power. So don't mention anything about the perfect acoustics on the AP test, please. But you can definitely use it as another example of just that. Okay. All right. Let's flip it over here and talk about financing empires, a topic we have talked about already when we started talking about, even in our last unit, another one of those keys to success, along with having a strong central government, kind of your bureaucracy all set up there. We talked about the fact that you had to have a revenue source. If you have no money, you have no empire. All right, you have no empire, you have no fancy hat, and it just keeps on going from there. And so here you go. We're going to go ahead and focus a little bit more on this. Give you some other examples of during our Unit 3 time period, how we see various empires coming up with ways of raising revenue. All right, and revenue is that fancy word we can use when we talk about money being brought in by taxes or tariffs on imports, exports, things like that. We can refer to that as revenue. All right, that's kind of one of those fancy words that the College Board will really be impressed with if you make use of something like that. All right, but that number one pretty much explains it. I don't need to overburden that. So let's talk about some examples of what is going on with taxation. And let's go back to Peter the Great's Russia. All right. Industry. This is going to be an area that you see governments still even today that kind of lean in on this. That if you tax industries that make a lot of money already, you potentially kind of take the tax burden off of your citizens and put on a big business. Okay, different governments have different attitudes about that. Some saying that actually don't tax the big businesses, because if you leave them alone, they're going to produce more jobs and that kind of stuff. Different kind of theories on here. But the way that what you have there is kind of Peter the Great's approach to this. He was taxing like shipyards, that are building ships. He's mining taxing. It's pretty much just anything that he can do so that he can maintain his state, his government. military things like that, and then also he can fund the growth of his empire. And that's a lot of times what people are thinking about when it comes to taxation. You got to keep what I want, but I'm going to use that revenue then to maybe go out and expand and bring in more territory, that sort of thing. Okay, and then for Peter, when the taxation of industries fails to come up with everything he needs, that's where he shifts over and then starts taxing his citizens. And a lot of times with this taxation, especially, oftentimes we're going to see in many of these countries where the burden is kind of on some of the poorest people in these empires. That's sort of an idea. All right. Staying on the same topic, but boom, go over here to the Ottoman and Mughal empires. Okay, and in the example in point right there, what they called tax farming, and that is this idea of the taxes would be collected locally. It's not like you're taking your taxes to Delhi or Istanbul. You'd have local tax collectors that have been set up as part of the central administration of the state, and then they collect the local tax collectors will do a lot of that collecting. They call it tax farming, and the problem with doing it this way is that a lot of times these tax collectors who are in all these kind of out. Think about it. You get this empire, and you have all these areas that are far, far, far away from the capital, from Delhi, from Istanbul, and a lot of times these tax collectors might just kind of take advantage of that distance, and we'll see a little bit of that corruption begin to seep in, where tax collectors maybe are skimming a little bit of the tax money they're collecting and keeping it for themselves, that kind of thing. And these are going to be some of the kind of problems that end up contributing to the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, is when you have that corruption begin to make its way onto the scene. It makes sense that they're using tax collectors from all over the place, because on the surface it seems to kind of organize things a little more efficiently and make for a quicker collecting of taxes. But that's kind of the downside to it. Your other option is, everything has to operate directly from the capital. When we're talking about a time when transportation and communications are still pretty much, in a pretty primitive state, and that would slow down the process. But again, there's a flip side to that. All right, but they tax their ordinary citizens, their peasants, the farmers. They tax them heavily. And sometimes that also has the downward effect of creating a lot of resentment amongst the poorer people in your empire, when they know that maybe or get a sense that taxation burden isn't being felt equally amongst wealthier people. That kind of an idea. All right. And we'll flip it on over here and head back to China. Again, we're kind of bouncing around in time here. And so when we go back to the Ming Dynasty, they use kind of what they call land tax. And so that's the idea of, like you've got there, that a landowner isn't going to necessarily be taxed in, where they want money from them. It's more like, okay, so, you own all these, hundreds, thousands of acres of land, and you grow wheat or some other kind of a grain on there, and so that's what we're going to collect from you. Is we're going to collect the taxes you owe us in grain, and then what the Ming Dynasty would do with that grain is would either flip it around and use that to help feed their population, or sometimes would sell that grain. You might end up seeing that being sold, overseas and that sort of a thing. Okay. And so that, there's some of it, they are using silver sometimes for taxation purposes and paying for taxes. But the tax grain as well, right? This land tax. And what we'll find over the long stretch of time is that, China just has such a big population, and, as they are a growing empire themselves, expanding, the Ming Dynasty and then the Qin Dynasty after that. that a lot of times the taxation still isn't going to be able to keep up with the spending that the government is doing while it's on this, kind of growth program and trying to expand territories, which requires paying for soldiers and then maintaining these lands that they've conquered. And, especially if they don't, whether we're talking about, Tibet, Nepal, the far western regions where the Uyghurs are, these are people that don't want to be conquered, and it costs money to have to keep soldiers there and keep an eye on them and all that kind of thing, and then administer and all that. Okay. Hey, revisit tribute system. Again, I don't need to completely go through this again because I think you guys pretty much have the idea by now. But again, we see some of those bigger empires like the Chinese, or we can go back to like the Aztecs back over in the Americas. Who kind of had that whole system worked out with some of their neighbors. We won't completely conquer you, but in return, you're going to show respect by supplying us with whether it's going to be a harvest of certain crops, whether whatever it is we decide to determine. We have again, just a reminder. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail on here because we've already covered this. And so, we talked about Vietnam, we talked about Korea in terms of China, the Aztecs making use of this over in the Americas, and then the Songhai Empire in Africa also having a little bit of this going on as well. So you still have the tribute system, and that is still producing, in a sense, revenue that the larger dominant empire can use. All right. Let's see, where do we go from this? Oh, we go on to a completely different topic. Oh boy, belief systems. This is section 3 of our 4 sections of chapter 3 or unit 3. Okay, and so we are going to take a deep dive into religion and really a big turning point in Europe is what we're going to be mostly focused on here, and one of those topics that seems like I think, high odds of showing up on the AP test, at least, if nothing else in the form of maybe like a set of some multiple choice questions. This is kind of always a big topic when we look at history, especially that little European history. When we think of religion and belief systems, I mean, and we're going to see examples of this where religion can be this really unifying kind of a thing. We see that used by, again, whether it was, we were talking about Askia the Great, it can be something that brings people together. But at the same time, we've got plenty of examples in history where religion is divisive and drives people to get apart from each other and ends up creating conflict. And in this case, oh my goodness, folks, this Protestant Reformation is going to trigger some ugly warfare amongst a whole lot of other issues. Okay, let me jump into here. There we go. And so, when we kind of take a little bit of a step back and look at the Catholic Church, it's been in control pretty much of a large chunk of Europe for some time. And really, you can go back to the Roman Empire when they adopted Christianity. You can go to the Holy Roman Empire, which kind of rises up after the Roman Empire falls. But the Catholic Church had been pretty much kind of kind of a one-pony show in Europe for a long time. There really was no other major religion of any type that that rose up to challenge Catholicism, and so the church had grown quite used to its power, and that had some downsides to it, and then when we add on to that we start to see, the rise of these monarchies. We see the English, we see the French. The Catholic Church sees that that's a threat to them. Okay, the rise of these centralized monarchies. They see them as potentially a challenge to the power of the church, the authority of the Catholic Church, those kinds of things. Okay, but here's what I'm going to jump into here. Because the Catholic Church has not really had to worry about any competition, there has been some corruption that has made its way into the church as well. Hold on here. Sorry, had a little scratch in my throat I had to get out there. So corruption. Um, we'll come back and remind you of these again, but some of the big examples of corruption that are going on are something called indulgences. And this is where by the time we're into the 14th and into the 15th century, we have examples of where officials of the church, to include priests, would take money for basically like absolution of sin. Okay, you've done something really horrible. Okay, you maybe you've committed adultery or something really really really. I mean, just sin of sins. Kind of area. And you're thinking this is it. I know I know the next stop. I know where I'm going. But if you pay a priest, that priest will say, bling, it's all forgiven. You're good. You're good. And that kind of thing. You also have another example here called simony, and this is where you have the selling of official titles of the church. Again, money talks, that kind of thing going on, and so a lot of corruption that's beginning to make its way into the bureaucracy of the Catholic Church. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? There we go. Theological differences. With this one, you have people who are starting to question by the 14th century just the very idea of the power of some of the officials of the church, whether it be bishops, cardinals, priests themselves. I think it's in England, you have a guy by the name of John Wycliffe, who writes about the idea that priests maybe aren't even really necessary to have your soul saved. That it's something you can do on your own, maybe through prayer and just kind of solitude and kind of self-reflection, those kinds of things. And so yeah, you have people that are starting to question the power of those church officials, that sort of thing. All right, and that is nothing that the church wants to be hearing about. To them, their word is, again, they're used to not being challenged, and here's suddenly people floating these ideas that maybe we should think, that kind of a thing. All right. Also, we're going to see that you could either argue this as a potential weakness. You do see the shifting of the kind of the seat of power of the church, which up to that point had pretty much been down in Rome. Kind of that whole the idea of the Vatican and all that, but now it's making its way to France, and this is something that happens during the reign of the Holy Roman Empire, where if you want to think of it as kind of like ground zero of the Catholic Church, ends up in territory within the boundaries of France for a while. All right, and so that just adds a little instability to the faith. It's kind of like hey, for a long time we were down in Rome, and now we're here. It's like, well, where are we? Okay, and then a big one for the Catholic Church is the the pandemic, basically the Black Death, bubonic plague. It really shook the faith of a lot of people in the Catholic Church, because if there was a time, they needed religion to come to the rescue, it was during the reign of this, and in the eyes of a lot of people, the faith failed them. That basically, losing a third of the population, not many families are left untouched by this. And so it really does kind of leave also a lot of people questioning for the first time the Catholic Church. So ABCD, none of it's good news for the Catholic Church. And it's definitely pointing towards, a religion that is standing on really, really shaky grounds as we get deeper into the 14th century. All right, which will bring us to Martin Luther and the establishment of Lutheranism. Okay, matter of fact, let me just jump on over here and we'll get into that story. All right, I'm watching the clock. Don't worry. So Martin Luther, he's a guy he's an official of the church himself. He is living in Germany. Wittenberg is the city that he is coming from, and he is a guy who is giving a lot of thought to what is going on here. with the church and becoming more and more disgusted with the church. And the main things that he is focused on are things like indulgences, simony. He's also focused on nepotism, which kind of is this idea that people, family members are getting kind of perks that within the faith that other people are not getting, that sort of thing. He finally reaches a kind of the breaking point, and he begins to write out basically almost kind of like a manifesto. He does it in the form of a list of all of his complaints against the church, all right, and puts this together in the form of what comes to be known as the 95 Theses. Think about it. You guys, have had to write those thesis statements before. Write 95 of them. And that's kind of, how he puts these in the form of, to what extent, no, I don't think he writes them like a College Board one. But in 1517, as the legend says, he goes to the main Catholic church in Wittenberg, and he nails a copy of his 95 complaints, objections to the door, front door of the church. Okay. Different versions of to what extent that really is the way it went down. But hey, it sounds really dramatic, so let's roll with it. Okay. And this is going to be this is going to be representative of what will become a split in the church. Located there, kind of the church, the Holy Roman Empire, all of that sort of thing, and is going to establish coming out of all of this will be a new religion after Martin Luther is excommunicated from the Catholic Church for his actions, and yeah, this is going to be, there's going to be a little bit of some politics involved in this because this is happening in Germany, which isn't Germany yet. Remember, it's a whole bunch of individual kind of Germanic states. But you're going to see political leaders up in Germany who are going to see this as opportunity knocking, kind of seeing the beginnings of this split, potentially the beginning of a new form of faith that Martin Luther is going to be leading, what will end up being called Lutheranism, all right? Some of these political leaders are going to see this as a kind of, opportunity knocking, and that maybe we can kind of put some distance between us and the influence that the Catholic Church has always had over, our region, over, the geographic area that they rule all these different little Germanic states. So, there's going to be some people taking advantage of this, that kind of a thing. All right. So getting back to Martin Luther, all right. This concept of sola fide, okay, which translates into faith alone. And this is kind of getting back to the idea that that Martin Luther and others who will join him are going to be arguing that the power of the priest, which is so central to Catholicism, is not necessary to faith, not necessary to salvation. That we each have it within ourselves. To be able to have that relationship with with God, with Christ, and that this idea, pretty much what he's arguing is the idea that you require a priest to be able to have that relationship, that communication, all that sort of thing. He's saying no, not necessarily, and so he's offering up an alternative here. And is also offering up an alternative that you got it right there. That definitely extends a little bit more of some religious power to women that does not exist in the Catholic Church. Okay, and so that's going to all get us into this concept of Lutheranism. That really all you need is faith. You don't need a priest. You don't need the bishops. You don't need the whole cast of characters. All you need is faith alone to carry you through, right? That's how we're going to get this whole thing rolling, all right? And I think, you know what? Let's go ahead and just hit the brakes there. If I get started on this, I'm going to be going over 30 minutes. So Calvinism, which is going to be pretty much a form of of Lutheranism, or another way of describing Lutheranism, folks. I started off with back there on the prior slide. This gets into an example what we call a Protestant faith. Okay, and when we think of Protestantism, think of the word protest that starts that off, and that kind of gets to what Luther was doing. He was protesting against some of the practices of the Catholic Church. Okay, Protestantism, and Lutheranism is going to be a form of the Protestant faith that kind of has its origins and its base in Germany. All right, and then Calvinism, and we'll talk about Huguenots and all that sort of thing next time in class when we jump back in here. And yeah, we'll focus on what Protestantism looks like in France, in England, that kind of a thing. All right, but I am over 30 minutes, and so I am out. See you soon. Bye.